What's up? It's FULLERMOE, the founder of GFX World. In this video, I'm going to show you my techniques for creating 60s and 70s style graphics inside Photoshop using Elton John as our inspiration. Now, if you're creating merch for an artist or band, trying to give them those throwback vibes, you can definitely implement these techniques. Let's get it. So on the left side of the screen is the design we're going to be recreating in today's tutorial. I just found this, scrolling through Pinterest. I thought it looked dope. Definitely had that sort of vintage vibe, but I can definitely see a company like Made Worn doing something like this. It also has sort of a contemporary feel to it, and that's sort of what I'm going for in today's video. I have some other examples here. So basically it always centers around a really solid sort of frame, and then usually a script font of some sort. Not always a script font, as this example shows right here. I think this might be Corey Myers. If this is Corey, if you're watching this, fire design. If it's not Corey, sorry. This could be Duran too, actually. I'm not really sure. I don't know who did this design, but it's dope. But yeah, basically just having the frame, having a nice script in there, maybe some nice vintage texture, more of the sort of muted colors. It's not super bright, for the most part. You're trying to capture that more 60s, 70s sort of vibe. The first thing we'll want to do is create this frame so we can embed the photo into it. Now, if you want to be extra lazy, you could just search probably Archway vector shapes, and you'd probably find a bunch of these on maybe Vecteezy or something, but it's easy enough to do it in Photoshop, so I'll just show you how I would do it. I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, and then I'm just going to draw out a circle and basically match as much of the curvature of the top of this frame as I can. So I'll just move this around until I've got it extended sort of down until it starts to become a straight line, right? That should work. And then I'm going to grab the rectangle tool, and I'll just start at the bottom, and I'll just drag it up until it sort of meets the top, where it starts to it's the halfway point basically on the circle. And then I'll just use the arrow tool and just sort of meet the side of this circle, and I've got view show smart guides on, so basically when it hits the side of this circle, it's sort of locking into place, which is helpful. And I'll just adjust it so that I have a pretty nice natural archway sort of shape, right? And you don't want to go too far out, because if you go too far up, you're gonna see basically the corner of that rectangle. So let me just take a look at this over here so I can see. Yeah, so that's a pretty good archway shape. So we can bring it over here, and then I'll just right click and go to merge shapes, so that's just one solid shape. So now if we add any effects to this, it's just gonna work one shape, one layer. Let's bring in this photo, we'll click it to make it visible, drag it above this new archway shape, right click and create clipping mask. Cool. So that looks pretty solid. So from here, we can probably start to add in some of the effects on this photo already, because filter gallery is going to play such a big part in this. I think we should just kind of jump right into it. First, I'm going to go up to this gear icon and click off show transform controls, because it's a little distracting. And then over in our foreground and background swatches here, I'll just click this black and white sort of default swatches and just set it back to the default, because now we're going to go to filter gallery, and basically whatever colors you're using for your foreground or background are going to show up here. So if I hadn't changed that, it would show up here as green and white, and that's not what we want, right? So I already have these settings sort of dialed in pretty much, and I'll show you what they are. So your effects panel over here is going to look not like this. You're probably just gonna have one effect, but you're gonna want to start off with stamp, right? So let me just hide these for now. We're gonna start off with stamp, and that's gonna be under sketch. So go to sketch, stamp right here. It should be in the bottom right corner. I've got the light dark balance set to 6, smoothness at 2. Basically, the lower the smoothness, the more detail you're going to see as you increase the smoothness. It's just going to sort of make everything more sort of blobby, for lack of a better word, and you just lose all the detail. So this can work good for some things. Maybe if you were doing like, if you were creating maybe like a stencil or something, like this would be really useful because you'd have just like larger shapes, but you want to have more detail. So I'm going to bring the smoothness back down to 2. Now the next thing you want to do is add 2 more effects, right? So I've got grain, and in order to add more effects, you basically just click the new effect layer plus icon at the bottom here. So if you click that, you can add in more effects. And so we're going to use grain as our first effect, and you can select that under texture grain. So I'll make that visible. And now up here under grain type, you've got a few different options. The first effect I'm using is clumped. So you can change it from regular to clumped. Intensity I've got set to 30, and contrast I've got to set to 30. I don't know if that was like my super mild OCD where I like numbers to be the same, or like 0s and 5s, or if this is actually the best. I would like to think it's actually what looks best, but you're gonna need to mess around with all these settings regardless, because you may not be using the same photo as me. So just dial in all of these as you need to, but I've got mine set to 30. The next effect is another grain, but this one is grain type enlarged. So we've got clumped at the top, third one down is enlarged, and this I've got, again, intensity set to 60, contrast at 10. So this to me works pretty well. I think it's more so an issue with the photo itself. I wish you could see a little bit more detail in Elton's face here, but the photo itself is kind of like low contrast, but it's super dark, so like you can't really make out those details. So I'm just gonna roll with this. Again, dial these in however you need to, but I'm good with this, so I'll just click OK. The next thing we'll do is change the blending mode of this filter gallery photo layer from normal to multiply, and I'm gonna rename this rectangle 3 to frame. Now what this is going to allow us to do is basically with the filter gallery layer set to multiply, we can add new layers above the frame and clip them to the frame, and then just like basically paint in different sections of this design. So if I just click this little rectangle with the plus at the bottom, create a new layer, now it's going to clip to the frame. I can grab the brush tool over here on the left side. You want to make sure you have hardness set to 100. You can just grab like a hard round brush, and then mess around with the size, whatever feels right for your graphic. And we can zoom in here, and basically like I can just start to paint in, let's say we'll start with the skin tones. So I can just paint in Elton's skin here. And this is gonna be a little bit tedious depending on how many areas you need to paint in. But if you look at the original photo, that's just how it is, man. You've got this you have his jersey painted like a gray color, even the long sleeves are like a dark blue, the piano, the background here is blue. So now I'm gonna approach this basically like a page out of a coloring book and just fill in the different sections with my different colors. You're gonna see the layers sort of like stacking up in the layers panel. Gonna try to keep things organized. I'll be right back. Alright, so we are back from our little coloring book adventure. There's a few things I want to mention that sort of came up as I was doing that. So the first thing is that you might have seen me using the polygonal lasso tool to just sort of like fill in larger areas like this, making a selection like that, going to edit, fill, just to sort of cover those larger areas. Obviously, like as you continue to sort of use this technique, there's going to be more opportunities to do that given whatever your photo is. But I do want to mention that it might be smart to avoid super straight lines. Like even now I'm looking at this straight line. I think that's a bad idea for this particular style, because overall it's meant to have that sort of like painterly, like illustrated sort of vibe, and you just wouldn't have like perfectly straight lines if that were the case. So what I would do is, like, anytime you see straight lines like this, and you can just sort of do this as you're coloring in your graphics, but either like use the same color and go back in here and like just sort of make it a little bit looser like this, or you could use the eraser, you know, and just like try to stay away from that perfectly straight line. It, like, if it's meant to be like mostly straight, cool, like, you know, you can have it be mostly straight, but I feel like if it's like clearly like very rigid, it just, to me, takes away from maybe that more authentic look that you may be going for. So just recommended that you try to keep it a little bit looser with this style. The other thing I want to mention is this gradient in the background. There's no crazy trick to it. It was just literally filling it in like I did everywhere else with just a random color, and then going in here to this layer, adding a gradient overlay, playing around a little bit with the scale and the positioning of these color stops for the gradient, but no, you know, magic trick there. Now I think one thing I am going to do is maybe fix these skin tones a little bit, because I want to audition some different colors. So the best way to do that is just through a color overlay. Definitely not a highlighter green like this. That looks insane. But just going over here and sort of clicking some different colors here. I think like it should definitely lean towards certainly like a lighter skin color, given that this is a Caucasian man. But I do want it to be a little bit more saturated than what I had previously. So maybe like just leaning a little bit more towards this. That I think also sort of lends itself, the more saturated look lends itself a little bit more to the more like cartoony sort of esque vibe that we're kind of seeing on the left side as well. So I think that maybe works a little bit better. Who knows, you know, we could mess around with these different colors all day. So I think from here, the best thing to do is just build out the rest of this frame just with super simple strokes around the outside. Now, if I was the best version of myself and this was for, let's say, Elton John, or, you know, another big name client, or really any paying client, I would probably make the strokes around the outside differently than what I'm about to show you, and I'm going to explain fully in a second. But the first thing I'm going to do is just organize everything over here. So I'm going to grab this top layer, hold down the shift key, grab this frame layer at the bottom, hit Command G, put everything into one frame layer here, one frame group rather. And then I want to add the strokes around the outside of the frame, right? So we'll double click the frame layer, and then I'll add one stroke, and I'm going to add the position as outside. Now this is where kind of what I was saying before is going to come in, and we're going to use this orange color right here. Just increase that to, let's say, 50 is probably good. Okay, cool. So here's where, you know, if you were really a stickler, you'd say, all right, Fuller, well, this is a straight edge right here. This is a rounded, you know, corner. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense, because this should be straight as well to match this. You're absolutely right on that. Do I think it's a make or break situation? Not really. And the one thing I do like is that now I'm able to add all of these strokes into this one layer, rather than parse it out into multiple shapes where I might be able to use the shape, I'll just show you. So I might be able to use this and use strokes up at the top here, and that would allow me to add that sharp edge. But I would have to do, let's see, 4 different shapes in order to do that. The other alternative would be to create the frame in Illustrator and just bring it into Photoshop. Okay, sorry, I gotta interrupt myself. I know this is super annoying, but when I made this tutorial, I had just moved. I didn't have internet. I think I was just like super burned out and kind of frustrated, but I wanted to get this done. And I don't know, I completely spaced that you could totally make all of these corners sharp if you just set all of the strokes to inside instead of outside. Like, I'm sure even some of you watching were like, Fuller, you can totally do that. So here are the settings. I've got the very top stroke set to inside with this light gray color at 10 pixels. The second one down is set to 40 pixels with black. The third one down is at 80 pixels with this gold color, and then the one on the bottom is 120 with this orange color. So basically like intervals of 40 through here and then 10 for the top stroke. So this is ultimately how it should have looked when I was done with the design. So jumping ahead to, you know, everything that you're going to see at the end of this tutorial, but crazy, honestly, no idea, but let's just pretend like I did it exactly like this in the first place. Okay, back to it. I feel like we're looking pretty good. You know, I think we can start to add in some of these other shapes, get the text, of course, added at the top. So let's just start with this background sort of element here, which is like these 4 bars that are like tilted. No great, you know, trick here. I'm just gonna grab the rectangle tool. I'll go over to our original image, our original design rather, and try to just like get the width down kind of to what they have. Maybe the width and the length here. Cool. I'll just drag it over here behind our frame and make sure it's staying in this group that we've created. And I'm going to double click. I'll change it to black, and you could also do that just by having that selected as your foreground when you create the shape. I did not do that. Shame on me. We're going to add an inside stroke of this light gray color. Let's see, probably like 15 maybe? 10? Maybe 10 would be better. Cool, okay. And I want to make it actually a little bit taller. I'll just sort of pull up on this bar, and then I'm going to right click on sort of the corner here on the outside, go to skew, and I'm just going to sort of tilt this the same way I'm seeing on the left side, and it's got a pretty good tilt to it. Maybe something like that. I'll just make sure it's centered on the frame, bring it down a little bit. And then what I would probably do is just duplicate this out and shift it down. So I will hit Command J, and then we'll make this that nice blue color that we're using here, and keep the stroke. And then I'm just going to bump it down using the arrow key right here like this. And there's no like right or wrong way, or like no perfect amount here, so I'm just again eyeballing it, because then we're just going to duplicate out both of these rectangles. So I'll just highlight both of these, Command J, and then I'll bring them down just like that. And then here's where we might want the spacing to be even between them, but again, even if it's a little bit off, that's okay, because that's just like kind of this style. So again, Command J with both of these highlighted, bring that down, and that looks pretty good. And there's a total of 5, so we'll keep it true to the other design with that. Again, down there. Oh. Cool. And I'm just going to grab all of them and I think maybe reposition them slightly so you're seeing a little bit more of that right side. And again, even if they're a little bit off center, that's okay. Because again, we're trying to like get in the mind of someone who actually illustrated this or painted this, you know, whatever method they used over here on the left side. So that will work. And honestly, like, I need to get better at making sort of little decisions like this. Like, why would you ever think to make, like, unless this was like part of Elton John's branding, like the 4 bars or something, I honestly don't even know why these bars are here. Like, they don't really add anything to the design. They're just like, I don't know, like kind of cool looking, but like they don't really add anything to it. So I don't know. I'm just going along with what they did, and yeah, sure, looks cool. So the next thing I think we can get into is this text at the top. I'm gonna move all of this down so we have a little bit more room to work with. And I will just go to this top layer, click into the text, and this is the font I'm using. It's called Wannabes, and this is the personal version. So if this were to be used for commercial purposes, if this was going to be for a client who is going to sell this Elton John shirt, you know, in stores or something like that, I would want to make sure that I had the correct license, which would be a commercial license. So sometimes, you know, certain fonts will say personal, they'll say commercial. In this case, this one clearly says personal, so we know exactly what it's for. So now that I've got this this text in here, I'm gonna bring the N a little bit closer to the J, because a lot of times with scripts, you just end up with a lot of space between characters in like a name, like especially like this, because you have this sort of tail coming off the N, and so that is creating like just like additional space. It's kind of hard to explain, but like it just happens a lot. I'll just say that. So like it's even happening over here, and so for that reason, they brought the N over the J. So like imagine this N stopping, imagine it stopping right here, and then this J not being connected. It would have to be like right here, right? So that would leave like all of this space right here. If you can follow that, again, sort of, it's one of those things where it's like kind of hard to explain unless you're actually doing it. But that being said, yeah, I just want to bring this N a little bit closer. So I'm going to highlight that and then just bring it like, yeah, negative, maybe even negative 100. Cool. And I could, you know, I could do the thing where the N was overlapping it, but it's not really going to work very well with this font because it's a little bit more bold than this one. And this tail, or like whatever you want to call this, on the N goes out much farther. There's definitely a proper name for that, but it's escaping me right now. So from here, I'm going to skew this a little bit. Actually, I don't even know if I'm going to skew it. Did I skew the original? I don't think I did. I think I just used, yeah, an arc. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is first let's change it to the correct color. So I'll just do a color overlay of this orange that we're using right here. And we're getting away from a little bit of the red orange. I don't know if I love that. I might try to get a little bit closer to that here. Can we do that? Let's zoom in. I just don't want to get too far away from the original, but yeah, that is the correct orange there. I don't know. All right. It's fine, I guess. I think I must have used an orange that was just a little bit off from this in the gradient, and so for that reason, everything else is sort of following suit. I'm not going to add any additional effects to this right now until it's sort of like completely positioned the way that we want it. So I'm going to click the T, and then up at the top with this highlighted, this text highlighted. That's a new thing, by the way, in Photoshop. You never used to have to highlight this in order to use this. I don't know why they thought that was a good thing, but whatever. So at the very top, you see the T, it says create warped text. Click that, and then we'll use just like arch, and we'll arch it just a little bit, nothing too crazy, maybe like 20, yeah, 20. And then I'll use vertical distortion just to sort of bow out the ends a little bit more, not too much, but I'm just sort of like eyeballing this here. Cool. Yeah, that works. All right, and then I'm just going to resize this to make it a bit larger. Nice and big at the top, because we also don't want we don't want all of this like negative space sort of sitting here, right? We want to try to avoid some of that, like a little bit. Like obviously they have some here, but like I don't want there to be a huge gap. Okay, so from here, let's look at some of the effects going on this left side. So I'm seeing the yellow sort of gold drop shadow, right? And then I'm seeing an additional drop shadow off that of black, and then it's outlined in white. I don't want to use like the drop shadow as a layer style. I think I just want to duplicate this out, to be honest. Like I think I just want to do it like naturally, and I'm looking at which way the drop shadow goes, and it's just up and down. So I think that should be easy enough to do. So I'm just going to duplicate this out. The one underneath we're going to change to this gold color, and then I'm just going to bump it down. I'm going to hold down the shift key so we can bump it a little bit further. And like if you wanted to get into the weeds on this, you could zoom in and like actually connect this right here. And do I feel like getting into the weeds? Not really. So like what you would do is like use the polygonal lasso tool maybe, and then create a new layer and then connect these like this and just do that all the way around. And I've done this in like a million other videos as well. And then just go to edit, fill. So that way you've got like that drop shadow sort of going on. I don't really feel like doing that on all of these. So I think we're good. Just like we're going to get a very similar effect. So it's fine. But if you want to take it to that next level, go for it. I'm going to duplicate this out again. And then on the bottom layer, so now we've got 3 levels of this Elton John text. I'm going to change it to black and then scooch that down as well. And then we're just going to group all of this together and add that white stroke around the outside, right? Cool. So we'll group all of these Elton John pieces of text together. Command G, jump into this layer, add a stroke around the outside. It's like that. And probably actually a stroke of black first. Maybe at 10, maybe 15. Then a stroke of gray around the outside. Sorry about that. I didn't notice the additional stroke of black. So yeah, basically stroke of white, stroke of black. And that is going to do it for that text. I'm just looking at it again, seeing if like anything seems off. No, okay. So 15, we'll just go to 30 here for easy math. Cool. So now I've got this text over the top, right? Definitely giving me, you know, late 60s, 70s vibes. And right now I'm kind of just playing into my own personal taste, to be honest. Like, I don't love, and this is obviously a great design on the left side, no doubt about it, but like, I personally just don't love how this is just sort of sitting on the top. I just feel like as a t-shirt design, it's going to end up really tall. And I think that if you just brought this text down a bit, it's going to help out with that. Yeah, just a personal preference. So I'm just going to like roll with sort of my gut here. Like that. Cool. All right, so we've got the text over the top. We've got Elton. We've got it colorized. We've got the little random bars in the background. Let's add this text on the bottom, and I want to make sure, I'm pretty sure it's ITC serif is what I used. So let's verify that. Yep, ITC serif Gothic STD bold, standard bold. All right, cool. So we'll go back up here, hide this, jump into our design, and I'll type out Los Angeles. And I think I might have skewed it a little bit too. So now let's switch up the colors on this Los Angeles text. We'll just double click into it. I'm going to sort of stray away from what they're doing on the left side once again and just do a color overlay of this teal color with a stroke of, let's say, black, and then another stroke of white or this light gray around the outside, and just keep it like pretty classy. Like I love what's going on the left side, don't get me wrong, but like I don't want to get into like making it look like chrome and like painted and all that stuff. Like, it's fun, but it would make this tutorial about 2 hours if I tried to do everything. Next, I'll just duplicate this text out, and then we're going to switch up the font to Euro style wide, I believe. Extended rather, okay. And I'll go with extended medium, type out 75, and extend it even further, holding down the shift key, changing that aspect ratio. Cool, and it's a little bit far. Oh, it's because it's set to 75 still. That would be why. Cool. Does that mean this is set to 75? Yeah, it is. But that's actually great. That actually looks fine. All right, that was just like a happy accident. Okay, so 75, and then we want to get the little bars in here. So I can just add these bars like this, And then I'll just double click this 75 text, go to styles and click new style, and then click OK, and then go back to this bar I just made and just apply that style right away to it. So with text, you know, you can just duplicate the text, but if you're doing additional elements but you want to keep the same styles, it's just easier to sort of do that. And I'm going to make this a little bit shorter. Cool. Now I'm just sort of freestyling. I'm definitely going off the map of what we're seeing on the left side, but it's all good. I feel like I made this like much, I don't know. I feel like I just did like, I did this text a lot smaller on the other one. In fact, I know I did. Let's take a look. How far off base did I get? Woo! Very far off base. All right. Oh, because I really skewed that Los Angeles text down. All right. Jeez. Yeah, I really skewed it down. I thought I skewed it differently, but that is my bad. All right. I did like the opposite of what you see on the left side. Look at this. Like, here it's like really tall, and here it's like, yeah, just not that tall. Definitely a different font too, now that I'm looking at it. I mean, it's obviously a different font, but I'm like, I thought I was much closer, but it's actually not that close at all, but it'll work. All right, so let's just keep cruising here. If you like what you're seeing, please take 1 second out of your day and hit that subscribe button. It would truly mean a lot. It actually costs me money and time to make these videos, and it costs you nothing to subscribe, and you can feel good about supporting this channel. Now back to the video. Cool. Okay. I think honestly part of it, and part of the reason why I'm like having a hard time like making some decisions, is just like I just wouldn't do a lot of this stuff, and like again, it's a great design, but I'm just like, I would just do this so differently, but that's not the game we're playing right now. Okay, so now we want to get this star added in here. I'm going to use one of my oldest tricks in the book, which is literally just using a font called Seeing Stars, and it is the W character. It's a perfect star. It works every time, and so I'm just going to make a big star right here and just sort of position it the way that we want, and then we'll add in some strokes and some inner glows and sort of try to mimic the effect that we're seeing on the left side. But we're just going to start here, and then we can always switch it up later. So the effects, I'm just going to add a color overlay of this gold color, and then I'm going to add an inside stroke of black set at 25 pixels. I'm going to add another stroke of this gray color set at 45 pixels. Whoops. 45, there we go, pixels. And then I'm going to add an inner glow and sort of try to crunch it up a little bit and stray away from the straight up like additional stroke of orange that you see here. So I'm going to change the color to orange of this inner glow, make sure the opacity is set to 100, increase the size, and then increase the choke maybe a bit. Bring the range up to 100, maybe add a little bit of noise and just like add a little bit of crunch to it. But yeah, I just wanted to give it a little bit more flavor than just having 3 strokes on the stars, and that was it. So I think this is probably the way to go. Okay, and then I want to just make that a little bit larger, reposition it like so. Cool. Okay, so now we've got the star. So now we got to add this other little photo over the star. Again, I don't know where this photo on the left side came from. It probably exists somewhere. Maybe the illustrator did just make it themselves, and that's why it's like a photo that doesn't exist, and that's why I couldn't find it. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. Here's the photo we're going to be using. I just filtered by large images, searched Elton John, Dodger Stadium, 1975 jersey, found this. Gonna right click, copy image, back into our canvas, Command V to paste it in, bring it over here, size it up, and it's not the biggest image in the world, but it's going to be such a small little part that it doesn't need to be super huge. But I'm just going to grab this right here so we're not like worrying about everything else. Just Command J that. Okay, bring it down here, click remove background. That should do a pretty good job. Yep. I'm just going to tilt it, and I'm not even going to go back and look at the original reference image. I'm just going to freestyle this 100%. Now, there are some areas here that, you know, I might want to clean up, maybe like around here. So I'm just using the brush tool with the foreground set to black, and I'm just sort of brushing some things out. And I'm just sort of trying to make this, again, like not look like it's clearly cut out, like it was done in Photoshop. So it should be a little bit rough around the edges. So it actually kind of did it for us because this is not the most high-res image in the world. But here we need to actually cut this part out because that is the background. So I'm just using that layer mask, cutting this section out. And alternatively, like if you wanted to use just like the lasso tool and do this, that would totally be fine too. Ever is clever. And then we'll just fill that in with black. Cool. Okay, and I think, yeah, this just looks a little weird here. I think that's like part of the background too. Get rid of that. Okay, and we'll reset the foreground and background to the default swatches by clicking this. Go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and we're gonna just use, you know, some of the same effects that we did previously, but we're gonna have to make some edits because, you know, this photo is not the same as the other one. I'm not really gonna worry too much about these because honestly, the grain is not doing a whole lot anyways in this particular image because it's so small. So I think this will probably work. So I don't know, I've got it set to 20 and 2 for the stamp effect. Cool, works for me. Click OK. Boom, we've got our little image here in the corner, and we don't want it to be pure white. So what I can do is just double click this layer and then do a color overlay, change it to this gray color, set the blend mode to multiply, and that's going to do the trick. So, you know, from here, if I wanted to add an additional stroke around the outside, that could be cool. I'm seeing a little stroke here, so why not? Maybe to 15, 10. Yep. 10 looks good. Okay, so there's one more thing we can do to basically add more detail to this graphic, but I will say that it's going to add additional ink colors. So if it's a case where you're limited to maybe 3 or 4 colors, skip this. But if you have the license to use 10 colors, 12 colors, you might be able to get away with this, and I just think it adds a little bit more dimension to the graphic overall. So what we're going to do is duplicate this photo layer, which is our multiply, you know, layer where we were adding all of the coloring underneath it, right? I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to make sure that it's still clipped to everything else, and I'm going to change this to Lowlights, right? Then I'm going to go into our filter gallery, and because it's a smart object, I can just double click this and just change the settings of the filter gallery. And basically I'm just going to increase the contrast and try to get some more details, some more like stippling and things like that. So we'll start by increasing the light dark balance. I'm going to keep the smoothness at 2. I think that works fine. But I'm looking at areas like his hands where it's just like stark white. And once you start increasing the light dark balance, you start to get more of that like stippling in there, which is just going to add more detail. I'm going to go down to gray and I'm going to increase the intensity of that. And I just sort of have to wait for it to load every time in this bottom left corner here in order to see where we're at. So that didn't do a whole lot. We can add more intensity to it. Increase the intensity. Cool. Okay, so this is like perfect. All right, so I've got intensity on the enlarged grain type up to 76, contrast 10, intensity of the clumped grain 58, contrast is at 30, stamp I brought up to 22, smoothness is at 2. Click OK, and then I'm literally just going to lower the opacity. Okay, so now maybe between like 20 and 25, somewhere in there, we're able to introduce a little bit more detail. So like now we've got all of these lowlights, right? And it's not like a crazy change, but when you zoom in here, now you're gonna see more detail here, you know, that you didn't have before, right? It was just like these blocks here. So I might even go up to 30%. But now we've got basically these organic, you know, lowlights in here, right? And you can keep as much of that as you want. If you want to go in here, you know, and mask this out like this, click, you know, layer mask, go in here and, you know, say like, that's a little bit too much on the face. Cool. Just get rid of it, you know, and you can leave as much as you want. If you like the way it looks around the nose, maybe you leave that, right? So that's just like a very simple way to add in some lowlights. But again, like now we're looking at, you know, a dark gray right here, and this would be like a tan, and this would be, you know, a dark teal color, right? So we've added all of these additional ink colors to the graphic. So again, if you have license to do that, go for it, but I just think it definitely adds, you know, that next level and just makes it pop a little bit more. So that is the name of the game. All right, so from here we need to add in the little stars around the outside. We got to add in the sort of like graininess around the text at the top as well, the texture, and we'll be good to go. All right, so let's start off with this top layer, and we're going to use the bling brush, which is part of the GFX World bootleg creator kit. So I'm just going to grab one of those bling brushes, create a new layer, and just click around here and add in some bling. We'll add some, let's say here, add some on the text up here, and I'm just keeping it the same. Like if I wanted to, you know, you could just tilt it like this. If you want to switch the style up a little bit, that's cool. Add one there, maybe add one to this Los Angeles text down here, maybe another one there. Cool. Okay, and let's add one to his helmet just for good measure. That looks kind of weird. Let's add one to the star. All right, cool. All right, so we're gonna get a little bit destructive with these, but it's really the only way to get that like super sort of grainy look to it. And I'm not going to get into like adjustment layers and things like that. I'm going to do this like very bare bones and destructive. So we're going to add a solid color of black like this. We're going to change the blend mode of that to screen so we can see what we're doing. Move it underneath those stars, and then I'm just going to, whoops, there we go, move it underneath these stars. And then I'm going to merge these two layers together. So I just highlight those, right click, merge layers. I'm gonna again change this to screen, go to filter, noise, add a bunch of noise. Really, you can add like as much noise as you want, really. And then I'm gonna zoom in, and we're gonna create some crunchy stars by going to then blur, Gaussian blur, and just blur it up a little bit like that. Cool. And then go to image adjustments, threshold. So now we've got some crunchy stars like that. That looks pretty good. Cool. And then I'm just going to grab the magic wand tool, make sure anti-alias and contiguous are not checked at the top. Click this white, hit Command J. Now we've got crunchy stars on their own layer, and we can add a color overlay so that it matches and it's that gray. We can change the blend mode on that to normal. Okay, cool, crunchy stars, and you can mess around with the settings on that if you want them to have a little bit more of that halo with the noise. Like you're more than welcome to do that. I just wanted some quick and easy, you know, stars like we did there. So the next thing we've got is this, this again sort of like crunchy, noisy glow around the outside of the text, right? So I believe this is our Elton John text layer here. Let's just label that. I took a good guess. And here we can probably do, yeah, sort of like a similar thing. So like I'll just duplicate this out. I'm going to double click this bottom layer, change the color overlay to, let's say, yeah, probably this gray color, right? Then change all the strokes to that gray as well. So now we've just got a solid block of white. Cool. And then I'm going to add an outer glow as well. So I'll do an outer glow of this white. And this, honestly, like, it doesn't even have to be, I don't even know why I'm changing it to this gray color. I think maybe just so like it vibes with what I'm doing right now, but we're gonna eventually threshold it anyway. So these can be like literally any color you want, but I think this just works better. So now I'm just gonna change the size of this and just sort of eyeball it so we have a nice glow. I would say do more before you do less, because you're gonna make like adjustments later and we're gonna be able to like shrink it down and compress it a bit more. Opacity can be at 100. You don't really need to add any noise now because we're gonna add that in manually. Cool. And we're just gonna do like some, again, quick and dirty, like crunchy glow around the outside. So again, I'm gonna do the same process. Solid color of black here. And then merge these two layers together. So we've got our big blob of white here. We're gonna merge that with this layer. Merge layers, change the blend mode of this to screen so we can see what we're doing. Go in here, filter, noise, add noise. It should pop up as the same noise we used before, so we might as well just stick with that. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, 0.5 Gaussian blur, okay, image adjustments, and threshold. And now we've got sort of that crunchy glow around the outside, right? And because we've got that outer stroke of gray as well, it's just going to sort of play off that and sort of like supplement it in some way. Oops, there we go. Cool. And this we could actually thicken up even more, and I think I might do that. So I'm good with this right here, but I'm gonna go in with another pass of Gaussian blur and thicken this up a little bit more. So blur, Gaussian blur, a little bit more though, more than 0.5, maybe like 1. Back to image adjustments, threshold, getting more of that crunch. So now it's almost like a stippling effect, which is cool and definitely has that more painted quality to it. Again, here we can just grab this white now with the magic wand tool, Command J it out, get rid of that bottom layer, color overlay of that gray color, and boom, now we've got some like sort of stipply, crunchy 70s-esque, 60s-esque you know, sort of glow around the outside. Now from here, you know, adding the texture on top is going to be sort of, you know, the final piece of the puzzle. There's a few adjustments that you could make, I think, further. You know, if I was really nitpicky with this, there's some other things I would do, but I think we should just get right into the texture. So what I'm going to do is just put this entire frame, and now this is basically just like the artwork, right? Whoops. Artwork. We're going to put this into a layer mask, and then we're going to grab our Thrift Lord brush set, and I'm going to start with something a little bit lighter, so maybe like 38, 32, yeah, let's go with 32, and I'm just going to paint in here lightly and add in sort of a thin layer. And that to me just sort of has like just like that overall worn look, like it's, you know, obviously been through the wash a million times. And then what you can do is go in with a thicker brush, and if you want, you can hit Command G, do another layer mask, and then that way you've got sort of the the two textures separated, right? So we can go in here and grab something a little bit thicker, maybe with like some solid like cracks in it. Yeah, maybe something like that, and add in some more cracks like this. And this is the part where it's just like you could spend all day figuring out, you know, exactly how you want these cracks to sit in here, how many of them you want. This is definitely a fun process, and honestly, like, it's kind of an opportunity as well to like get rid of some of these larger clumps. And if you think about the way a vintage shirt might look, if you had bigger pockets of ink, they might be some of the first to get really worn down. So it sometimes makes a lot of sense to add larger pockets of texture like this to these larger areas of color or ink, you know, as it would be if it were printed. So we can do that and sort of click around here and add in more. Again, I can do this all day. But Thrift Lord is dope because and using layer masks is essential too, because it's just knocking out everything, right? So as I'm using this, I'm knocking out the design. I'm not just like, it's not just sitting on top, which would be the case if you were to use like multiply or something like that. And if you want to get more into how to best utilize the Thrift Lord brush set, I did a whole video about how to become a Thrift Lord in Photoshop, so you can check that out. But yeah, now I'm basically just like putzing around. But that is the majority of the tutorial. I think, you know, if you utilize all of these different effects, really get into the details of, you know, coloring these different segments, getting down to even like adding in the little highlights on his glasses, you know, even things like that, can really take this to the next level. And the devil is in the details, so always worth paying attention. If you learned anything at all from this video, if I provided you with some information that you can add to your design toolkit, all that I would ever ask in return is you hit the subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.